Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a journey into a concept that's, well, as old as philosophy itself, yet more urgent than ever. Human rights.
That's right.
You hear about human rights constantly in the news, political debates, even everyday conversations. But how deeply do we really understand what they actually mean, where they come from, and the complex ways we try to protect them around the globe?
It's a critical question, and this deep dive is designed to give you a clear, robust understanding of this multifaceted field. We'll unpack the core ideas, explore the global and, the regional frameworks that enshrine these rights.
And how they're protected, right?
Exactly, and look at the real-world mechanisms attempting to uphold them. It's a truly fascinating story, really, of how humanity has tried to codify its inherent dignity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to equip you with essential knowledge, strip away some of the academic jargon, maybe, and uncover some surprising insights about this bedrock of international law. Get ready for some aha moments, because this isn't just about definitions, it's about what it means to be human in our interconnected world.
Absolutely.
So let's dive in with the most fundamental question. What are human rights? You'd think there'd be one crystal clear legal definition, right? But the material we looked at suggests it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is that there isn't a single universally agreed upon legal definition. If you think about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, it deliberately avoids a precise definition. Why? Because the goal was, well, to keep the scope broad, to protect everyone, and not to inadvertently limit these fundamental protections.
Right. Don't want to leave anyone out by mistake.
Precisely. So instead of a definition, the UDHR starts by emphasizing the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. That's the foundation. Freedom, justice, peace.
That makes a lot of sense, keeping it expansive. So,
Yeah.
if not a rigid legal definition, what's the general understanding among scholars? What do they tend to agree on?
Well, most agree that human rights are rights inherent to all humans simply because they are human beings. They're not granted by any government. You don't need permission to have them.
They just are.
They just are. They're often called natural rights, demanded by our very nature, sort of indispensable for a dignified life. They exist whether a government recognizes them or not, whether they're respected or violated.
Okay, here's where it got really interesting for me in the research. This distinction between human rights and public freedoms. Are they simply two ways of saying the same thing, or...
That's a great question, and actually many authors do draw a crucial line there. Imagine human rights as the fundamental dignity you're born with, universal, like the air we breathe.
Yeah.
Public freedoms, on the other hand, are what a specific country's laws then do to protect that dignity. So if a country writes into its constitution that you have freedom of speech, it's taking that inherent human right and turning it into a public freedom within its borders, guaranteed by its legal system. They become these legal conditions for individuals to act freely within the state's positive law, the written laws.
Got it. So human rights are the big universal concept, and public freedoms are the local legal expression of those rights. But the sources also mention this distinction is blurring, right? It's not so clear-cut anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a key point. As more and more nations become parties to international human rights treaties, they're essentially agreeing to uphold what are known as peremptory norms.
Peremptory norms.
Yeah.
Like bedrock principles.
Think of them like that, yes. Bedrock principles of international law that are so fundamental, no state can simply opt out. So this means human rights aren't just international ideals anymore. They're becoming deeply embedded in national laws, blurring that old theoretical line quite significantly.
Okay. Another crucial distinction that came up is between international human rights law, IHRL, and international humanitarian law, IHL. They both protect individuals, but in, well, very different circumstances.
Oh, absolutely. This is a vital difference to grasp. IHRL is like the everyday rules of the road for society. It applies in times of both peace and war. It aims to protect all human rights for humanity as a whole.
Okay. Broad.
Very broad. Its sources cover treaties, customary law, universal and regional agreements. Now, IHL, that's more like the emergency rules that kick in during a crisis, specifically an armed conflict.
Wartime law.
Exactly. It applies only during war and focuses on protecting specific groups, non-combatants, the wounded, prisoners of war, civilians caught in the crossfire. Its main pillars are those 4 Geneva Conventions of 1949.
Right.
And their additional protocols. So very different contexts.
Okay, that clarifies things. So human rights are this vast overarching concept. How do we even begin to categorize them? Our sources show that scholars have devised different ways to classify them, but it's not always straightforward.
That's right. And there's no single, legally binding classification, mainly because these rights are so deeply interconnected, you can't really separate them neatly.
Makes sense.
So these categories are mostly doctrinal, academic classifications used for study and understanding. Some common approaches look at individual versus collective rights, or the very popular division based on generations.
Let's talk about those generations. It sounds like they emerged at different points in history. Or
Right.
that's the idea.
Precisely. That's the traditional view. The first generation generally refers to civil and political rights. Think freedom of opinion, expression, religion, the right to vote.
The classic freedoms.
The classic freedoms, yeah. These ideas found their voice in historic documents like the American Declaration of Independence in 1776, the French Declaration of the Rights of Man in 1789, and were later firmly enshrined in the UDHR.
And then gave the second generation, what did that add?
The second generation brings in economic, social, and cultural rights. So things like the right to work, to education, to social security, the right to participate in cultural life.
Okay.
While some were kind of touched upon in the UDHR, they really got their robust framework and dedicated international covenants later on, more fleshed out.
And what about the third generation, often called solidarity rights? That sounds newer.
They are more modern concepts, yeah. Evolving from the challenges of our contemporary world, think of rights like the right to security, the right to development, or the right to a healthy environment.
Things that require cooperation.
Exactly. Carl Vassac coined them solidarity rights because they often demand global cooperation and international community intervention for their guarantee. You see them reflected in texts like the UN Millennium Declaration of 2000, emerging from complex issues like, rapid scientific advancements and global challenges.
And I've heard whispers of a fourth generation even being discussed. Is that really a thing yet?
Well, yes, it's being discussed, though there's still very much in an emerging, less defined stage. It mostly concerns the ethical and legal frontiers of technological developments, areas like medicine, cloning, or addresses specific rights of particularly vulnerable groups impacted by these big changes still forming.
Okay, so these classifications, first, second, third, maybe fourth generation, they seem useful for understanding, but are they perfect? You mentioned they're not legally binding.
Not at all, and that's a really crucial point. They've faced criticism for being, relative and sometimes imprecise. For instance, the idea that civil and political rights somehow preceded economic, social, and cultural rights isn't entirely accurate.
Oh, so...
Well, both categories of rights were addressed by the global community in the very same foundational text, the Universal Declaration. And what's more, the two major international covenants, one for civil and political rights, the other for economic, social, and cultural rights, were actually adopted by the UN General Assembly on the exact same day in 1966.
Wow, okay, that is an aha moment.
Yeah.
That really underlines that they're meant to be seen together. Equally important from the start, internationally speaking.
It does, and it leads to a profound understanding. What is now universally agreed upon is that human rights are fundamentally universal, inherent, interconnected, integrated, indivisible, interdependent, and solidarity-based. They truly form a single, holistic entity.
Indivisible, you can't pick and choose.
Exactly. Think about it. When the right to education, a second-generation right, is denied, it doesn't just impact that individual's learning. It can cripple their ability to exercise freedom of expression or political participation, first-generation rights, because they lack the tools to engage.
Right, they all link up.
They all link up. As the Vienna Declaration of 1993 powerfully affirmed, all human rights are universal, indivisible, interrelated, and interdependent. The international community must treat human rights globally in a fair and equal manner. The universality of these rights is really beyond question now.
So why is all of this so important to you, our listener? What does this intricate web of concepts and classifications mean for the real world? The material we've reviewed highlights the significance of human rights on multiple powerful levels.
Definitely. On a theoretical level, human rights fundamentally shift the focus. They place the individual right at the center of how we measure positive development for the international community.
It's about people, not just states.
Exactly. Their promotion is absolutely essential for the global spread of democratic values, and they raise awareness about critical, shared risks like the causes of conflicts or, the widespread environmental degradation that impacts everyone.
And practically, how do we see this importance playing out in our daily lives and around the world? How does it become concrete?
Well, at the national level, it's increasingly common, almost standard now, to find detailed human rights provisions woven directly into modern constitutions.
Like the Algeria example.
Like the Algeria example, yeah. Their 2020 constitutional amendment dedicated an entire chapter to fundamental rights and public freedoms, spanning 43 articles. That's a significant commitment on paper. National judiciaries also play a pivotal role, ensuring fair trials and protecting these rights through law.
And education, too, you mentioned.
Yes, we also see a growing trend of integrating human rights education into curricula at all levels, helping to build this culture across society from a young age, trying to make it part of the common understanding.
And on the international stage, human rights are clearly a major player in global affairs now.
Oh, absolutely. They've become a central topic in international relations. You'll often find that donor countries or major international financial institutions like the World Bank or IMF consider a recipient country's human rights record when making critical decisions about aid or loans.
So there can be real consequences.
There can be. We also see the principle of humanitarian intervention, though it's very controversial, the idea that the international community has a responsibility to protect populations from mass atrocities. And, of course, dedicated international protections for vulnerable groups like refugees, people with disabilities, and ethnic or religious minorities.
Okay. Now let's talk about where these rights are formally guaranteed, where they're written down. Our deep dive reveals this rich tapestry of global and regional texts that enshrine human rights.
Right. The journey really begins globally with the United Nations Charter of 1945, surprisingly early, maybe.
Yeah.
This was the very first international document of a global nature to directly stipulate human rights protection. Its preamble famously reaffirms faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person.
And the equal rights of men and women. I remember that bit.
Exactly. And it also includes several articles emphasizing respect for human rights and their core principles: dignity, equality, freedom, a foundational step.
But the UN Charter, while groundbreaking, wasn't quite enough, was it? It wasn't the whole story.
That's right. There were disagreements about the legal status of the Charter's human rights provisions. Were they truly binding on states? And there was a sense that they were just too general, not specific enough.
So that led to the UDHR.
That led directly to the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, in 1948. It became the core text, a sort of common standard of achievement for all peoples and nations. But it still didn't have the force of a legally binding treaty. It was aspirational, in a way.
Okay, so it set the standard, but needed teeth. To make these rights legally enforceable, we needed the international covenants.
Exactly. This is where the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICECR, come in. Big step.
The two big ones.
The two big ones. Both were adopted by the UN General Assembly on December 16, 1966, though they didn't actually enter into force until a decade later in 76.
Wow, 10 years.
Yeah, it takes time for states to ratify, but they were a direct response to the UDHR's non-binding nature. They elaborate on these rights in much more detail and make states legally obligated to comply once they ratify.
And what's interesting is how much they share, despite covering different types of rights, civil, political versus economic, social, cultural.
Indeed, yeah. Their preambles and several initial articles are almost identical. They both affirm inherent dignity, equality, and that these rights are the foundation of freedom and peace.
So similar starting point.
Very similar. Then the ICCPR focuses on personal freedoms, life, liberty, freedom of movement, fair trials, freedom of belief, conscience, religion, and so on. And importantly, it established the Human Rights Committee to monitor implementation.
The monitoring body.
Yes, and the ICSCR in turn covers those social foundations: the right to work, fair wages, safe working conditions, education, cultural life. Together, the UDHR and these two covenants form the core of what's often called the International Bill of Human Rights.
The International Bill of Human Rights. Okay. Now, beyond the global stage, our deep dive also highlighted a robust system of regional instruments. It's not just a top-down UN approach, is it?
No, and that's crucial. Regional systems often provide more direct and sometimes more culturally attuned avenues for protection. Europe was a real pioneer here with the European Convention on Human Rights.
Signed in Rome, 1950.
Yes, signed in Rome in 1950, actually before the UN covenants even came into force. And what's truly groundbreaking about the European system is the direct access individuals have to the European Court of Human Rights.
So people can take their own government to court internationally.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah,
For rights violations under the convention, that's a powerful mechanism.
definitely. What about other regions?
Well, the Americas followed with the American Convention on Human Rights in 1969. It notably emphasized that fundamental human rights stem from inherent human dignity, not just from an individual's affiliation with a particular state. Again, reinforcing the need for international protection beyond national borders.
Okay. In Africa?
In Africa, particularly after many nations gained independence, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights was adopted in 1981. It stands out because it emphasizes not just individual rights, but also people's rights, collective rights, and also duties of the individual, reflecting perhaps different cultural and historical contexts.
Interesting. People's rights and duties.
Yes. And finally, the Arab world has its own Arab Charter on Human Rights, adopted in 2004 and entering force in 2008. It reaffirms the Arab nations' belief in human dignity, references the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, and also includes language rejecting Zionism and racism, highlighting a specific regional perspective on these universal principles.
Right. So a global framework complemented by these distinct regional systems. Now, having all these magnificent documents is one thing, but how are these rights actually protected? How do we ensure they're upheld? Our deep dive reveals this multi-layered system, international, regional, national mechanisms trying to turn ideals into reality.
Yeah, protection is key. At the international level, the United Nations Human Rights Council is a major player. It was established in 2006, replacing the older commission.
Right, the Council.
It's an intergovernmental body, 47 member states elected by the General Assembly, and it promotes and monitors human rights globally. It does this through various procedures, including its truly unique Universal Periodic Review, UPR.
The UPR. What's unique about that?
Well, it evaluates the human rights situation in all UN member states every 4.5 years or so. Every single country comes under review by its peers. No country gets a pass, which is pretty powerful in principle.
A review for everyone.
Okay.
Any other big international bodies?
The International Labor Organization, ILO, also plays a really prominent role, specifically safeguarding workers' rights through established reporting systems and complaints mechanisms they've had for a long time. Very focused on labor standards.
And it's not just governments and these big intergovernmental organizations doing the work, is it? NGOs, non-governmental organizations seem incredibly important too.
Oh, absolutely essential. NGOs are often on the front lines. They utilize various mechanisms to ensure effective implementation and, crucially, expose violations.
How do they do that?
Well, through things like producing detailed thematic and annual reports, conducting fact-finding missions, often in dangerous places, and applying what's sometimes called media pressure.
The name and shame approach.
Exactly, the name and shame procedure. Publicly highlighting and condemning violations to bring global attention and hopefully pressure onto governments or other actors.
Right. Okay, moving down a level to the regional stage. Our sources indicate that most of these regional human rights instruments have established their own bespoke protection mechanisms. They're not just declarations.
Yes, most do.
Yeah.
Building on the European Convention, Europe has established very robust judicial bodies, most notably the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. As we said, individuals can bring cases directly against states.
A real court with binding judgments.
Yes. In the Americas, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights was founded back in 1959, and it works alongside the later established Inter-American Court of Human Rights.
So a commission and a court there too.
Exactly. And similarly, the African Charter eventually led to the establishment of the African Court on Human and People's Rights in 1998, which began operating in 2004. So these regional courts offer crucial avenues for recourse when national systems fail or are part of the problem.
Got it. Finally, let's bring it home to the national level. Using Algeria as that specific example from our sources, what do those mechanisms look like on the ground within a country?
Well, Algeria, like many countries, has worked on establishing both governmental and non-governmental institutions. There used to be a National Advisory Committee, but that was replaced in 2016 by the National Council for Human Rights.
The NCHR.
Yes. It's set up as an independent national body under the 2016 Constitution. Its job is officially to protect and promote human rights, review national legislation for compliance, offer recommendations, and report annually to the president. So, an official government-sanctioned body.
And the non-governmental side, civil society.
On the non-governmental side, Algeria has active civil society organizations. The sources mention the Algerian League for the Defense of Human Rights, for example, and the Entity Network for the Protection of Children's Rights. These groups contribute significantly to monitoring the situation on the ground, advocating for reforms, and supporting victims. That independent voice is vital.
Wow, what a journey. Seriously. From abstract philosophical concepts, really, to concrete international treaties, vibrant regional conventions, and these vigilant national bodies. It's clear that human rights are an incredibly dynamic and multifaceted field, constantly evolving.
Indeed, it really is. We've seen how the recognition of that inherent human dignity underpins everything, and how the global community, despite challenges, has moved towards affirming that these rights are universal, indivisible, interrelated, and deeply interdependent.
That indivisibility point really struck me.
Yeah, a violation of one doesn't just impact one individual or one right. It ripples across the entire spectrum.
Yeah.
It reinforces that they truly form a single, integrated entity essential for human flourishing. You can't just protect some rights and ignore others.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Hopefully you now have a more comprehensive understanding of human rights, their definitions or lack thereof, classifications, importance, sources, and the mechanisms trying to protect them. It's a powerful foundation for understanding current events, engaging in informed discussions, and recognizing the efforts both successful and, let's be honest, ongoing, and often difficult to ensure these fundamental protections globally.
Exactly, and this maybe raises an important question for you to ponder as we finish. While the frameworks for human rights protection are extensive, maybe more extensive than many realize, how do we, as a global society, effectively address that constant tension? The tension between national sovereignty, a state's right to govern itself, and the universal obligation to protect these indivisible rights, especially as new challenges like those emerging in that potential fourth generation concerning technology, AI, bioethics, and particularly vulnerable groups continually arise. How do we navigate that?
That is a truly thought-provoking question to leave you with, finding that balance. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into human rights. We hope you feel much more informed and ready to explore these vital topics further. Until next time.